I wanted to show you how easy it is to animate lights. Let's continue to work on this composition that we have been looking at in the last few lectures. I am going to go ahead and just remove my parallel light, which is the light that we're currently using that's casting the shadow, but we'll leave our ambient light in place, which is just adding a darker shade to the overall scene and creating a little bit more of a mood. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to add a new light. So I'm going to go into Layer, New, Light, or we could use our keyboard shortcut of Shift, Command, Option L, or that would be Shift, Control, Alt L on the PC. We're going to go ahead and be using a point light for this example, and I'm just going to change the color of the light to a very light lavender. We'll just add a little bit of lavender, but real close to the white area. And for right now, let's just leave the intensity at 80, and we'll leave the rest of the settings as they currently are. I'll click OK, and as you can see, the light has been added into my scene. Now currently nothing has changed, and if we go ahead and add an additional view to our composition, you will see that the point light is over here, and currently my whale shark is in the lower left hand corner. If we scrub through the timeline, you can see when the whale shark starts to enter the middle of the screen or starts to interact a little bit with the light, then the whale shark is going to become a little bit more lit. What I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and open up my point light, and we'll go into the light options, and we're just going to go ahead and increase the fall off distance. We talked about this previously, and you can think of the fall off distance as something that would be similar to a feather on a cone edge. The fall off distance applies more to the outside of the light rather than just the edge of the light. If we leave our fall off at smooth, and if our radius is set to 100, you can see what it looks like. And then as I increase the radius, the scene will get a little bit more lit. Currently, the shadow is extremely large, and part of that reason is because the light is really close to our whale shark. And we will adjust that in just a minute. But for right now, I'm just going to increase my fall off distance just a little bit more. I'll leave this so it's right around 1200. And for the radius, let's just set that so it's roughly around 300. Now, what I want to do is I want my light to animate and follow my element. We already have the animation in place, and we have applied that to the whale shark. So if we go into whale shark, you can see that we have some transform position properties that we've already created. So I'm just going to select these keyframes and I'll copy them. I'm going to come into my transform properties on my point light, and for position, I'm simply going to paste. And now you can see as we scrub through the timeline that the light is going to follow our whale shark. And the reason that we're currently not really seeing our shadow is because the light is sitting at the same Z index exactly as our whale shark. What I'm going to do now is I'll move back to the beginning keyframe, and we're going to adjust the Z index. So I'm going to pull this back quite a bit, and you'll see as it gets farther away, the scene gets a little dimmer, and in addition, my shadow is going to get a little bit smaller. So if we scrub through the timeline now, you can see that the whale shark is traveling with its shadow, which is kind of what we want. In addition, I want to make the shadow appear more soft-edged. I'm going to go into the shadow diffusion, and I'm going to increase the shadow diffusion. And you can see as we up this, my shadow gets blurrier. And I think I'll just pull the light away a little bit more. So I'm just going to continue to move this out in Z space, and probably about 1200 roughly is going to look good. Because the light is so much farther away, we are also getting an overall dimness in our scene. In order to brighten our scene a little bit, we already have this ambient light, and our ambient light is currently on. So if we open our ambient light, we can just increase the intensity, which is going to brighten up our overall scene. So you can see as we increase this light, our scene gets a little bit brighter. So we will bring this up so that it's considerably brighter than what it was, maybe about 65. And then I'm going to go back to my point light and I'll just increase the intensity of this light a little bit too. And I think that is starting to look really good. So now if we want to preview and play, we can of course scrub through the timeline, which will give us a good idea of how everything is looking. And I think that looks pretty good. And then if we want to play our animation, we're going to have to close this second view. But before we do that, I did want to point out that my light gets quite a bit brighter on the right hand side. And you'll notice that that's because I had moved the Z position at frame 1 out farther, and then at the last keyframe the Z position was still remaining at its original position. So you can see how much brighter that looks. If you ever need to adjust multiple keyframes, you would need to make sure both the keyframes were selected, or you'd have to go to each keyframe and make the adjustments as needed. But once you do that, if you go ahead and give your animation a preview, you'll end up with something that looks like this. And we'll just let this RAM preview quickly so that we can see it play in real time. When you're using lights, the RAM preview does take a little bit longer because it's a little bit more processor intensive for everything to render. You will need to be patient while you let After Effects do its thing, and then you'll be able to see what it looks like in real time. It's really fun to be able to animate lights and different elements because you can really get some dynamic and interesting types of results.